Hello, welcome to Citizens Forum. I'd like to start by thanking our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this program happen every week. We're going to be talking about the issue of terrorism to start the show. And I've just got two questions. First of all, regarding everything that's happened in Paris and the creation of this huge explosion of fear. First question is, would they, meaning NATO and the United States, carry out a terrorist bombing in Paris? And for me, the answer to that is yes, they would. Did they do it? I have no idea. Until there's a full investigation, I have no idea what happened. But would they do it? Yes, because they've done it before. And secondly, would our media lie to us about everything that's going on? And I have to say again, yes, they would lie to us because, in my opinion, they always lie to us about important issues. So we're not getting really a full and honest picture of what's happening in the world. But today with Walter and Mehdi, we're going to talk about all these things from maybe a different perspective. So Mehdi, welcome. And you wanted to talk or start by talking about the role of the West in terror.
Yes, I wanted to talk about what's happening in Syria and why ISIS is there. Who is ISIS and where is it coming from? Just in last August, the WikiLeaks files were published in a book by Julian Assange. And in one of those files, there is a cable from 2006 from charge d'affaires of the United States Embassy in Damascus, Mr. William Roebuck, December 13, 2006. And in this cable, diplomatic cable that he's sending to Washington, he wrote, "We believe Bashar al-Assad weakness are in how he choose to react to looming issues, both perceived and real, such as the conflict between economic reform steps, however limited, and entrenched corrupt forces, the Kurdish question, and the potential threat to the regime from increasing presence of transiting Islamic extremism." So what they are saying in this cable, they are saying the only way we can use the weaknesses of Assad is in how he reacts to these potential destabilizing issues. And one of them is the conflict between economic reform that Assad put in and the entrenched corrupt forces that has been in Syria. So Assad as a reformer is the enemy of United States, and they want to use the conflict between his reform and the corrupt entrenched forces as a way to destabilize Assad. Another way is using the Kurdish population, and the third one, the transitory Islamist extremists that are going to Syria. And then he said, this cable summarizes our assessment of this vulnerability and suggests that there may be action, statement, and the signals that the U.S. government can send that will improve the likelihood of such opportunities arises. So he said United States should use and come with a plan to use these vulnerabilities to destabilize Syria. This is, remember, this is right after the job they have done to the people of Iraq, you know. So they were planning in 2006 to start destabilizing Syria. And what they did, they sent these extremists in, and the extremists start shooting and using snipers to shoot at the police and the security forces from the populated area. So using the population as a human shield for their destabilization program. We have seen this exactly the same thing in Ukraine. So United States was really behind what's happening, the devastation of Syria. They started it. They look for the vulnerability. And Assange said that the plan was to use a number of different factors to create paranoia within the Syrian government, to push it to overreact, to make make it fear there is a coup. And the key statement is this: WikiLeaks cable revealed that these plans came from Israeli government and show that United States government intended to work with Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt to encourage breakdown of Assad regime as a way of also weakening Iran and Hezbollah. So what's happening in Syria in the name of Syrian revolution is just nothing but a CIA attempt to destabilize and destabilize Syria and the regime change. So we never heard about that. These WikiLeaks files were published in August, and the corporate media and CBC never concentrate on them because they are real evidence. They are diplomatic cables from United States government. Another issue is the issue of Saudi Arabia. We saw in that cable that it mentioned the Saudi Arabia. The role of Saudi Arabia. General Martin Dempsey in September 2014 in a congressional hearing, he said that our allies are funding ISIS. And with allies, he didn't mention the name, but the allies are Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Turkey, you know. And Vice President Joe Biden, in October of 2014, in a speech at Yale University, he said the same thing, that our allies are funding ISIS. So on one hand, the allies are funding and arming the ISIS. On the other hand, United States and West using that as an excuse to bomb the hell out of people of Syria and change the Assad regime. There was just yesterday, June 23rd, 2015, actually, that came out that there was a group of media personality from Australia was touring Israel. And one of them, Sherry Markson, of Australians, which is a big newspaper in Australia, she had some difficulty with the security people because they took them to this hospital, Zevi Hospital in northern Israel, and they were seeing these fighters, these extremist fighters that fighting in Syria, they are brought to, after they are wounded, they brought to Israel to patch them up, to send them back.
So you're saying that ISIS fighters were being treated in Israeli hospitals? In
Israeli hospitals. And that was here in the last, I read, Israel has treated 1,300 Syrians who have been injured in the war, 530 of them in the Zev hospital. Why Israel? You know, helping the rebels and the ISIS and the Islamists. There was another article that showed that how Ukrainian weapon ending to the hands of ISIS. They are sending arms from Ukraine through Black Sea, through Turkey, with the facilitation of Turkey, to the ISIS and the so-called Islamists.
When you say they, I mean, I'm assuming you mean the United States.
United States, and these are the United States allies. All of these countries are their allies. And another thing that came out in terms of Saudi Arabia, it was said that when they cut the head of the people, you know, I mean, that type of brutality cannot come from a human being that is aware. There were a speculation that these fighters are being drugged. We saw about 2 weeks ago, on October 27, 2015, there was an article that a Saudi prince was busted with 2 tons of drugs, you know, cocaine and drugs, amphetamines, which called Captagon. These are the drugs that used. This is the subtitle of the article. A Saudi prince has been arrested after 2 tons of drugs, popular with ISIS fighters and Syrian rebels, were found on the private jet. This article is by UK Express, the paper Express. So we see that they are not only arming, they are paying, and they are providing all sorts of things for this war of devastation. So when people talk about refugees, where is it coming from? These refugees are coming from creation of this destabilization and this war by sending fighters from Chechnya, from United States, from Canada, from all over Europe, you know, deceiving these kids to go to fight under the influence of drugs.
So who are you saying is behind all of this?
It cannot be anybody but United States because their cable.
And it's the lunatics who run the United States. This has nothing to do with the people of the United States.
No.
You know, just as a side note is that, you know, there was the deal between General Dynamics of Canada and Saudi Arabia to supply $15 billion worth of armored vehicles and weapons to Saudi Arabia. And the thing is that they are, you know, an ally of Canada, according to Stephen Harper. We'll have to see what Trudeau has to say about it. And the thing is that the other observation I made was, you know, previously, you know, the horrific acts of beheading people were often being shown by the government of whatever you call the ruling regime in Saudi Arabia. Yes. And that's a standard practice for them, was to behead political prisoners, or what they term to be criminals or whatever, and they are our allies. So that's the shocking thing.
Let me read to you from an article, 30th July 2004, by Robert Fife, National Post. Saudi Arabia funds the global propagation of Wahhabism, a brand of Islam that in some instances support militancy by encouraging divisiveness and violent acts against Muslim and non-Muslim. The report from Council on Foreign Relations say that, you know. Yeah. So as early as 2004 they knew, and they said this massive spending is helping to create next generation of terrorists and therefore constitute a paramount strategic threat to United States. And then it talk about the Saudi Arabia funding the mosque in Toronto, in Calgary and other cities, and they never stop them. Why? When they own their own report by foreign relation, Council on Foreign Relations, which is a very important body.
Okay, so here we are. An attack has just happened in Paris and many other places around the world, but the one in Paris has certainly caught the attention of Canada's corporate media. We're being fed a never-ending now specter of fear and lies and misinformation. The truth, I think what you're saying is the truth, that the United States and its allies are funding ISIS. Now, if that cannot ever be said by our media at the same time as they're pushing us into war to fight ISIS, which they've created, then something very, very weird is going on. And I mean, we are increasingly in danger. I mean, they don't seem like they're willing to stop without destroying everything. And I mean the people who run North America.
Let me mention another thing. If you remember, we talked about those Toyotas, shining Toyotas that ISIS were driving in Syria and going to Iraq with. And we always ask, where are they coming from? They've got those trucks. But then it came out that in an article in April of, they are asking this year in September, and the State Department resumed sending non-lethal aid to Syrian rebels. The delivery list includes 43 Toyota trucks. And then there was an article in Independent of London on August 12, 2013, very clearly show that the British government were sending trucks and SUVs to the rebels, and also the French government.
Now, to the rebels.
Islamists. Here I read you one paragraph. The British government is considering sending weapons to moderate rebel fighters, arguing that a failure to do so would not only further empower President Assad, but also weaken future potential factor in Gulf, especially Qatar. And then in the next paragraph, line up all the items that the British government sent, and these are 25 tons, 120 tons, 6 4x4 SUVs, 5 non-armored pickup truck, and so on and so forth. So the mystery of those shining Toyota came out. There was I like to mention these issues that are sitting in the desert of Nevada, shooting people in Afghanistan, in Yemen, and in other places. The documentary called The Drones, and is done by Tonhei Hassan Shai. And it was on CBC. Drone was saying, has detailed the callous term people in the program used to describe children. And they use the word fun.
Facts do you think, say in the last 5 years, the United States have had in that region?
It's many. I just quote you one of the information. In one campaign in Afghanistan, U.S. Special Operation airstrikes between January 2012 and February 2013, targeting 35 people, killed more than 200. They are killing in the name of our civility. So who is creating? And these drone operators were saying that we are, by our action, creating the next generation of terrorists. When you kill children...
So how do we stop the lunatics who run the West?
What we have to do, we have to challenge the media. Why none of these issues are being discussed extensively? We see in CFAX, how many times in last few weeks I heard about marijuana, legalization of marijuana. Every day we are hearing 2-3 sessions. How many times about this issue? How many people, do you smoke marijuana? I don't. Do you?
Perhaps I did.
Absolutely not ever.
No, I don't think there are that many people are interested.
Believe me, a lot of people are interested in that. But CFAX is doing the exact opposite of what we're talking about. They tout the official story as if there was no question. In fact, one of them said, I heard this said on CFAX by a host, basically Canadian soldiers into the Middle East to fight ISIS, which
is their creation.
Which is their creation. The media is our greatest enemy. When
Russia got involved in September 31st this year. So
1 minute left.
In 1.5 months, they wipe out almost 60% of the ISIS. And after the Paris attack, what was David Cameron asking Mr. Putin to do? Is stop bombing ISIS. Stop the bombing. The Saudi Arabian said to Putin, Russia is very dangerous now. Saudi Arabia last Putin bet to wipe out evil ISIS. So they are, all their allies of United States are pressuring Putin to stop bombing ISIS.
Yeah, and today they shot down a Russian bomber, and somebody also blew up a Russian airplane. Walter, thank you very much. Mehdi, thank you very much. And everybody, I mean, the West is killing people by the hundreds of thousands in the Middle East, and now they're bringing the terror into Europe. And when I say they, I mean the same people who are doing it in the Middle East. We have to focus on the real enemy, which I think is the people who run the United States, the corporations, the power structure, and our own Canadian media, which is just pushing, not telling us the truth, and pushing fear, pushing anger, and misinformation. Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back. This is the Walter and Jack segment, and we're going to just be talking for a few minutes about, I guess, some things you can keep your eyes on as they pan out over the next little while. I want to start with the Alberta government, Rachel Notley, and her great, it's being portrayed as great, greenhouse gas reduction plan and everything for climate change. When the corporate media starts telling me that story, I think we all have to be a little bit suspicious. They've done that to us before. They brought in an NDP government. It happened here in 1991. And the NDP government in 1991 brought in the best logging plans in the world. But I was involved in the issues, and really nothing much changed. We were destroying our forests prior to the NDP coming in, and we were destroying them for many, and still are after they came in. The rules and laws did not change. So now Rachel Notley, NDP, Alberta, they're solving the problem, moving ahead, carbon taxes, but can any of it be believed? I don't know.
Well, it's quite complex because you could think, well, you have the NDP and that should be progressive and, you know, the standard narrative. But if you dig in a little bit, you realize that the NDP has very closely collaborated with the corporate sector for a number of years, and particularly with the public relations side of the thing. And, you know, so you'd really wonder about what really went on in Alberta and how Alison Redford was run out of town on a rail.
Run out of town by the media, destroyed.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the Conservative governments poisoned half the province and gave away all the money. There was never a word of criticism about any of that.
But Alison Redford was sort of like an NDP. She was, so the Conservatives sort of had an NDP premier, but they still had their regular crowd of MLAs, so that wasn't going to work. And I think they realized they needed to have a real NDP government, one that would collaborate fully with the corporate sector, and without any grumblings and stuff by these radical right-wing MLAs. And through a process of a year or so, they brought in Jim Prentice, the Conservative leader that really didn't want to be the leader and didn't really want to be the premier. And then the election happened, and now Rachel Notley's in there doing the job.
So I think everybody should really just keep an eye on what happens, what really happens with climate change issues and greenhouse gas issues in Canada over the next few months. We're being told a story. I really hope it's true. I hope we are doing something great, because God knows we have to. But we have to make sure that the good news is actually happening. You wanted to talk a little bit about the case of the RCMP bombing of the legislature, I guess it's 2.5 years ago now, on Canada Day.
Yeah. Well, I believe his name is John Nuttall and Amanda Crody. They were a couple that were living in a basement suite in Vancouver. They were certified patients under psychiatric care. They were severely addicted to heroin, and they became involved in a plot to bomb the legislature. And the thing about that whole story is that it's so incredible from the start that anybody that's inquisitive would go, well, how did that happen? You know, you basically have two very unstable, mentally unstable people getting involved in this plot. Now, I just clipped this from the paper last week.
So it says RCMP may have acted illegally, says judge. And basically the trial is back on, and the judge is looking at the issue of, were they entrapped by CSIS and the RCMP?
That's right. The 242 officers that worked on this entrapment case, 242 operatives of CSIS and the RCMP. I just want to read a paragraph or two here of what the RCMP and CSIS did in order to enable this parent attempt to bomb the legislature. It says here, over the course of the investigation, undercover officers posing as jihadi warriors gave Nuttall and Karodi groceries, cigarettes, bus passes, cell phones, phone cards, clothing, cash, and a portable hard drive. They also provided the pair with a place to work on their terrorist scheme and a location to build the explosive. They chauffeured them to various stores to purchase bomb-making equipment and transported them to and from Victoria and around the Lower Mainland over the course of the 4-month-long sting operation.
And it's also worth mentioning that they were afraid that they would be killed if they didn't plant the bombs.
And they testified to that in court. And I think you also brought in a letter to the editor that was a response to this article.
Yeah, so to me, the entire case is a fraud. Canada should be ashamed of what was done to those two people. The people at the top of the RCMP should resign. Harper should be held accountable, because this was, to me, this was entrapment. I mean, maybe I'm completely wrong, but from what I've read about this thing, it never would have happened in a million years without the RCMP making it happen. And yet, a few days later, after this story, the TC prints a letter to the editor which says, now the police are being made to look like the bad guys, and the lawyers are dragging it out because they're getting paid. And then it goes on to say, if it takes entrapment to catch terrorists, so be it. We are facing the most dangerous time in history, and our leaders need to respond accordingly. The other side is playing hardball while Canada insists on playing slow pitch. But this has nothing to do with the reality of that case. These were two people who never would have done anything. The entire plot was created by official Canada in order to terrify people here. And a lot of people were scared when they heard that bombs had been planted outside our legislature, which could have gone off and killed a lot of people. This never would have happened. So it's just another part of this creation of fear that is being done to us month after month, year after year. This was a small part of it, but two people have been in jail for years.
You know, Jack, I mean, it's so astonishing that they would put that many resources on this case. We have two impoverished people living in a basement suite in Vancouver with no resources.
And no intention of doing anything.
With a history of heroin addiction and psychiatric problems. And, you know, the thing that we were trying to find out, and it's hard to get down to, is how did the police identify them in the first place? And, you know, if you really look at it, it just from the start, they were set up. Yeah. They were approached and set up.
Another one, we got an email. There are a lot of warnings, but they're all inside in the small print.
Oh, absolutely. And if you just, and you know, there's a movement worldwide, people trying to get these warnings just placed on the package of the item, of the cell phone.
So what does the warning say?
It says, don't hold this near your body, and you know, it says that it could exceed Federal Communications Commission's exposure limits, which are ridiculously lax, by the way. They're only based upon the principle of heating
So it's
tissue.
kind of like the tobacco warnings, which people had to fight.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people died because of tobacco. And our government and the media were completely involved in making that happen. And now it's the same thing with cell phones. You know, I walked past a couple of kids the other day, and they were having a great time talking to each other. And plus, they were one of them was on a cell phone, and I thought, it's just as if you were smoking a cigarette. You just don't know it because you trust our leadership that this stuff is okay. It's not okay. They don't care. They only want the money. Mount Poly?
Yes, well, there's an article in the paper in the Vancouver Sun yesterday saying that the containment pond that Imperial Mines has put in place to contain some of this toxic sludge that's coming out of their mine, that's now back in operation, it's in peril, and the water may breach even this small containment.
But the mine
pond.
is back in operation.
The mine is back in operation.
Unbelievable, unbelievable.
So yeah, and I mean the people up there are really complaining and asking the Ministry of the Environment to take steps. And you know, these are the same people that are protecting us from the pollution that's running off the landfill sites in Shawnigan Lake. You know, let's not forget who's taking care of us here.
I just want to say something about the vaccination issue too. Every few months we get a big push from the media about how important it is to get vaccinated and how bad the anti-vaxxers are, the people who don't believe that we should be forcibly injected with whatever a corporation wants to put into our body. So, but this is the story the media never tells, that the company that makes the MMR vaccine, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, I think it's GlaxoSmithKline, two of their scientists, plus somebody from the regulatory body, have been in court for more than 3 years. These are two scientists who work for the company. They're suing the company, saying they lied about the studies and tests they did to show the vaccine was more effective than it was, so it could meet the standards and the government would give them hundreds of millions of dollars to buy it. their own scientists are suing the company, saying they're misrepresenting the truth about the vaccines, and our media will not say that one time while they keep telling us how safe and effective they are.
You know, Pfizer, the makers of Viagra and Botox and all that, just merged with another company, and Pfizer's now going to be head office in Ireland, where they're going to pay 1/3 less taxes. And they merged, and they were purchased for $166 billion. That's the size of that company, $166 billion. So, you know, we're talking big pharma. We're not, that's not an exaggeration. These are massive corporations.
Walter, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
And thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back. In this segment, we're going to be talking to Saanich Councillor and CRD Director Vic Derman. We're going to be talking about sewage treatment. Today is November 24th. Vic, you're bringing a motion forward to the CRD tomorrow, which will be the 25th, and people will be watching this show a few days after that. It's a very important motion. Maybe you can tell us about it.
Sure. I gave notice of motion last meeting, which I'm required to do if I'm a private individual or private member of the committee bringing motion forward. Comes up tomorrow, and it is a motion concerned with going out to the private sector for a high-level request for expressions of interest based on the goals we have around the project. And those primary goals are to minimize the cost to the taxpayer and maximize the environmental benefit through a number of things. Basically, to say to the private sector, okay, here's what we want to accomplish. Give us your best and brightest ideas, and then bring them in, evaluate them, and see where we want to go.
Okay, now we are actually very close to making a final decision on sewage treatment. I think that's going to happen in January. So this is very, very late in the game, and I know you've been trying to do this for many years, and it's incredible that it hasn't happened, but
well, it's actually the third motion I brought forward this year.
Yeah. And all you want is to open the process up so that everybody who has technology, I guess, and ideas in sewage treatment can put them in, and we can see what'll work.
There's a couple of things behind it. One, when you come to the best solution, it's not necessarily talking about a site, and it's not necessarily talking about a technology. Really, the best solutions come from somebody taking those pieces and putting them together in an innovative and creative manner. And so you could give, it's sort of like saying you give somebody bits of parts and they build something really good out of it, somebody not so well. So we're looking to say, you know, yes, technologies have changed. Yes, there is more available. What are some of the creative end products that private sector could come up with? And I think some of them could be very, very good. Now, the other thing is, really we're looking at resource recovery. Try to increase environmental benefit by using parts of the sewage stream as a resource, and also to try to minimize the cost by selling that resource. The biggest area, you can get some resources from the liquid sector, and it's a liquid part of it, and it's important as to how you design that. But the really big opportunity for resource recovery exists in the solids, the biosolids that come out of the sewage, and that's what you get when you separate the liquid stream from them, and then you treat the liquid and you have the biosolids remaining. They are, by and large, carbon-based material. There looks like there are opportunities to integrate a number of technologies that are available right now to integrate those biosolids with other parts of the solid waste stream, like the kitchen scraps, like a fair amount of what goes into Heartland. Basically, you're looking for any carbon-based material as long as the carbon is in a relatively short cycle. Fossil fuels are not a short cycle. They took millions and millions and millions of years to create. Something like wood is a relatively short cycle. Something like organic materials and kitchen scraps are a short cycle. They're going to degrade and simply go back in the atmosphere. That happens naturally. It happens every year. That's why in the spring you get a little bit less carbon in the atmosphere because the trees are pulling it all in. And then in the fall, you get a little bit more carbon in the atmosphere because they're releasing it as the leaves decompose. So you can take advantage of that and say, as a step in between, let's take that and turn it into a valuable resource.
What is the resource? Okay.
You can gasify it and get gas. There's some technologies that take it and turn it into a kind of wood, a pellet that can be used as a fuel and other things and so forth. So what you're trying to do is replace the fossil fuels that are a very, very long-term cycle with things that come from the short-term cycle. And there are huge opportunities there. Now, if you can integrate those resources, you can produce more of them and you can make more revenue. You also can avoid infrastructure costs. Yeah. If I build one plant that handles three things, well, you know, I've dealt with the sewage, I don't have to build infrastructure for the kitchen scraps, and I've extended the life of Heartland. Those are all huge pluses.
Okay, so but we are on the verge of making the decision as to which sewage treatment system is going to be put in place, I think. Is there anybody looking, as you're asking here, just more further afield to see what's out there?
Not much, maybe a little bit, but you know, the people you want to look are the people who have been spending the last 10 and 15 years developing innovative solutions. And they are not necessarily the consultants you hire or whatever. They're the private sector companies who have gone out and created a new approach, a better approach.
And I guess it's being sold in places around the world.
Some of them are brand new, and that you want to be very careful of.
Okay.
Some of them have been around for quite a while elsewhere, in Europe in particular. Some of them, the parts are tested, but they haven't been put together exactly in this configuration. Okay. But all the parts work, you know, so the configuration is...
So what is being looked at right now? Because just from my trying to find out, it looks like we are still looking at basically secondary treatment.
I wouldn't say that, but we're looking at a process that to me is not ideal, where we're dealing with a process, we're going out and trying to decide upon sites, first of all, and then developing some solution sets for those sites. How can you pick the right site if you don't know what the answer is going to be? The answer might be that you want 12 small sites. The answer might be that you want one big one, or 2 or 3 or 4 medium ones.
You know, Vic, I've agreed with you on this for years.
Yeah.
We should just, I mean, what is the problem with just opening up the process and looking at everything? And yet, it still hasn't happened, and there have, dare I say it, been some real shenanigans take place to make sure that it never did happen.
You know, it baffles me a little bit, honestly, also. It's not a difficult thing to do. It wouldn't be necessarily time-consuming. People have said, oh, this will put us back for years. Well, we've already managed to go through about 8 or 9 years, you know, at the way we're going. You can conduct this kind of high-level request for interest in probably 3 months, get the results back and spend a month or 2 analyzing them, and then start to deal with who you're going to have put it in. Not only that, but there are huge opportunities to do some pilot projects right now. We have the biosolids from the existing treatment plant on the Saanich Peninsula, and they are right now going into Heartland as a hazardous waste.
Yeah, and we should just say there is a sewage treatment plant on the Saanich Peninsula.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you're saying...
And it produces biosolids, and they have no good use for them this time, so they're being landfilled in Heartland.
So this, we could build a plant.
We could put some of these plants are pretty mobile and pretty easy to put up and put down, and I'm quite sure there are several vendors who would be quite happy to put a pilot plant in, or we could run a request for, you know, a competition for, as well as the one I described. We could run a competition for who would put in a pilot plant and look at the best technologies for that. So we have not only those biosolids, we also have kitchen scraps in the region that we're having problems dealing with. Victoria, Oak Bay, I guess Esquimalt are sending their kitchen scraps right now to Richmond. So they have to be trucked off because we didn't wind up with a good local solution. So we could put them into the mix. We have lots of wood scraps and wood material that's going into Heartland that could be put into the mix. So we could, while we're selecting the larger system, test one or two of these technologies and see exactly how they worked in our environment.
And if somebody is watching this and saying, oh, Vic and Jack want to delay this thing even more, turn it around, because really all of this should have been done at the very beginning. It's not our fault that this wasn't done. Yeah. If we don't do this kind of thing, there's a good chance we're not going to end up with the best project we could get, which I think is what you've been saying all along.
And there are a couple of things. One, there could be a huge tax or cost to the taxpayer. Some of the proponents of integrated systems, some of the companies, there's been two that have presented to the CRD, had said done properly, they could do this project at no net cost to the taxpayer. One of them proclaimed at the start of his presentation, said, I don't want any of your money. Well, that's fine with me. He said, you know, all
now,
of it.
we don't know if that's
Well,
correct.
we don't know if it's correct. But
if somebody's saying it, shouldn't we at least
evaluate it? Exactly. Now, the other thing is the level of environmental benefit. The failed plant at Macaulay was supposed to do the equivalent in reducing greenhouse gases of taking 1,200 cars off the road. Fairly significant. They studied a distributed plant that would take about 5,000 or 6,000 equivalent cars off the road. One of the proponents, again, who's come before the CRD, has indicated that his integrated system would take the equivalent of 20,000 to 23,000 cars off the road in greenhouse gas reduction. That's huge. So not only would it cost you net less, possibly, it would also possibly create much greater environmental benefit. We need to find that out. And, you know, it's not a lot of time delay. The pieces to do what some of these people are saying they would do are in play, already exist. You know, at least one company has done a theoretical design for what they would do in the region. If we found out they were real and it was evaluated and, you know, the proper experts said, yes, this is something that can be done, it would not take a lot of time to put it in place. Yeah. Probably less than the process.
It's possible that if we go through that whole process, we'll still end up with the current idea. That's
fine.
Possible. But to not ever have looked, there is something very wrong with this whole process. Vic, thank you very much for trying so hard for a long time to make this happen.
Well, this is, I think, motion number 9. Maybe number 9 will be better than lucky 7.
And by the time you watch this, the decision will have been made. So at least if you haven't heard what it is, try to find out. Thanks for watching this segment. Welcome back. Our guest in this segment is Calvin Cook. We're going to be talking about the plan, well, it's happening now, to dump 5 million tons of sort of toxic waste above Shawnigan Lake, which is also very close to Victoria's water supply of Souk Lake. This is being done by a company called SIA. I don't know what that means.
South Island Aggregates. They've since changed their name to South Island Resource Management, but the principles remain the same.
Yeah. So the idea of poisoning Shawnigan Lake has seemed crazy from the beginning, but Christy Clark, I guess, supports it wholeheartedly, and it carries on. So there's a couple of Supreme Court challenges. Why you have to go to the Supreme Court to challenge this insanity is beyond me, but there you are.
Yeah, I think that's the huge concern here. The underlying concern, of course, is that here we are challenging the Ministry of Environment in order to protect our own clean drinking water, Jack. That perhaps is the definition of insanity. Certainly shouldn't that ministry, above all else, be protecting and placing the concerns of the citizens and the health of the citizens of BC? Shouldn't that be their responsibility? Shouldn't it be the responsibility of our minister, above all else, to make that the protection of the environment, protection of clean drinking water, her #1 priority?
And who is the minister?
Mary Pollock is our minister currently.
And you know what? I have not heard one word of criticism from anywhere in the media about her on making this decision to allow it to go ahead, nor of Christy Clark. I mean, shouldn't the media be just jumping all over them, saying, why are you poisoning Shawnigan Lake, and also potentially poisoning, I guess, Souk Lake, which is Victoria's water supply, with 10 billion pounds of, what is it?
Basically, the permit allows for any type of importation from anywhere of toxic materials, and that can range from old petroleum sites to old asphalt plants. What's excluded under terms of the permit is radioactive material and biomedical waste. Other than that, the door is open. We can take material from anywhere. Most recently, a barge load has come in from Port Moody containing high concentrations of sulfur. Definitely a concern. Certainly nowhere in the Lower Mainland do they want that, but we'll take that in our community watershed.
You know, it's just incredible that this is happening in Shawnigan Lake. It's like a deliberate attempt to, not attempt, a deliberate plan to poison Shawnigan Lake, because there's no hope that that's not going to happen.
The concern that the Residents Association has had from the onset, Jack, was that we could see what was going to be the result of this. This year, November 13th, Friday the 13th, kind of an appropriate day, Vancouver Island Health Authority issued an unprecedented do not use advisory for the residents on the south end of Shawnigan Lake because of what had happened that day, a breach of soil and material and water from the site. Vancouver Island Health Authority, to their credit, put the concern and the health of the citizens first and said, do not use the water. So that means a citizen can't drink the water, can't bathe, can't brush, can't do anything with the water from that lake until results were received back from Vancouver Island Health Authority.
So what happened?
The results, fortunately, the results came back negative, that there was no adverse impacts.
Yeah, right. But what happened to cause this?
This happened in the first week of operations, the first major week of operations of that site. A barge was brought into Nanaimo from Port Moody. A barge of contaminated material was brought into Nanaimo. The material was then being trucked down island through all our communities, brought to the site. Heavy rains impacted the site, and water was discharged off the site directly into an ephemeral stream feeding into Shawnigan Creek, which then led directly to Shawnigan Lake.
You know, Calvin, from the very beginning, this has seemed so just completely and totally insane. And yet, Christy Clark, following orders from who knows where, why? I mean, do you have any idea why this is being done? It just makes no sense.
Jack, a lot of times I can answer questions, but that's the one question I can't answer. And I appreciate your support and the amount of support you've shown to the citizens of Shawnigan Lake over the years that we've been discussing this. But the one question I cannot answer is why. It makes no sense for so many people to be put at risk for the benefit of so very, very few. Residents of Shawnigan Lake assume 100% of the risk with no benefit. Now, people may think, well, it's just Shawnigan, but really, if it can happen at Shawnigan, there's no place in the province that's excluded from this type of activity occurring. That's our concern. And when we look into how the permit was issued from, I encourage people to take a look at our website, thesra.ca, take a look at the legal archives, review them. Our allegations are that the engineering firm that provided the science that the Ministry of Environment relied on to make their decision was an active partner in the outcome. They didn't get paid unless the permit was approved. How can that be allowed to stand when the company providing the science has a direct outcome dependent upon them being granted that permit?
So if the permit is not approved, they don't get paid. So it's in their interest to make sure the permit gets approved.
Correct. And under the professional reliance model, that's who the government is relying on. That's who the statutory decision maker is relying on input from those engineers.
So, and this is important because this is the way our country works now. It happens everywhere. The company that wants to poison the lake, if I can say that, they hire a company to do the science. And that science, in quotation marks, is then relied on by our government as the definitive proof. And this happens with Health Canada. It's endemic around this country. The oil companies, the nuclear power companies, the drug companies, they do the studies and our government believes them and then goes ahead and does whatever the corporations want.
In this case, the very engineering firm, Active Earth, is also charged with monitoring the results from the dumping on that and monitoring compliance and non-compliance issues.
No.
What also has happened in this case, Jack, is the Cowichan Valley Regional District, the property is not zoned for that activity. The Cowichan Valley Regional District is also in BC Supreme Court challenging the provincial government's overruling of local government's land use. So again, for everybody within this province, if you feel that you have zoning in place to restrict, to prevent this type of activity, think again. The provincial government is going to BC Supreme Court challenging citizens' right to determine land use within their own areas.
Wow, this is big. I mean, it's so important that, I mean, if they can get away with this, as you say, then what can't they do?
That's our concern, and that's why the Residents Association has taken this. We've been through the Environmental Appeal Board process. The permit was upheld. We felt there are a number of errors and omissions in that. New information is continually coming to light. We've applied for a judicial review. Hopefully that review will take place some point soon. What we're asking our government to do is to put a stay in place. Do not allow any further contaminants on that site until the full legal process has been heard. There's a number of new revelations that have come to light. Revelations of bribery of public officials, revelations of trips to Las Vegas, revelations of fraud in obtaining that permit. The court system should be allowed to take place to have a judge, independent judge, look at all the information that should have been available to the Environmental Appeal Board, but wasn't. It was actively concealed by the proponents, South Island Aggregates, Cobble Hill Holdings, Active Earth, concealed information during that Environmental Appeal Board hearings. That information has now come to light. We're asking that a judge be given the opportunity to review all the facts and make a determination at that point.
But while that legal process is taking place, Christy Clark says they can keep adding toxic material.
That's correct. So now we have, at this point, Jack, we have citizens up there, concerned citizens, some of them not even residents of Shawnigan Lake, but deeply concerned about the impact on freshwater, putting themselves at risk, standing in front of trucks, getting arrested, risking a criminal record. People are getting arrested, and our concern is people protecting the environment are getting arrested, and yet the very people who are polluting our lake are allowed to do so under a permit issued by the Ministry of Mines, issued by the Ministry of Environments. Something is wrong, Jack, and we would like to get to a bottom of it.
And, you know, from a media point of view, honestly, I'm not hearing this in the media with the intensity. I mean, they're going to poison Shawnigan Lake. They're going to poison, can I say they're going to poison Souk Lake? Souk Lake is actually closer than Shawnigan Lake to this.
There's been a number of comments made that there's no proof of connectivity between that site. Although the site is closer to Souk Lake than it is to Shawnigan Lake, Souk Lake being Greater Victoria's water supply, there is no proof, 100% proof of connectivity. And all we're saying is that there's no proof, 100% certainty that they're not connected. Why take the risk? If we look at the risk-benefit analysis, who benefits from this project? Very, very few. Who's at risk? Well, we know the citizens of Shawnigan Lake, the 12,000 people that rely on that aquifer, are at risk. But what about the 300,000 odd people in Victoria that rely on the Souk Lake watershed? Can they be told with 100% certainty that they're not at risk? What about an earthquake? I see they're having an earthquake preparedness conference. November 2011, 4.4 kilometers from that very site was the epicenter of an earthquake. What happens if an earthquake happens when we have 2.5 million tons of contaminated soil up there? 3 million tons, 5 million tons of soil. The soil will sit on that site for perpetuity. It is not being treated, it is being capped and stored, and there it sits waiting for the inevitable. On November 13th, we got a forewarning of what will happen. It's time for all of the citizens of BC to listen to that, to take action, get a hold of their elected officials and say, this is not right. Clean water is too important. This madness has to stop.
Calvin, thanks to you, and really thanks to all the people of Shawnigan Lake for this long fight that you've done great.
Thank you for your interest, Jack.
And thanks for watching this week's Citizens Forum. This is another important issue. It's, the country is getting crazier. What else can we say? Thanks for watching.